In 1995, I was diagnosed with clinical depression and put on Prozac. A few weeks later, my godmother telephoned and told me I was way too self-absorbed, and she said I needed to get in touch with the Lord. She told me she was going on a trip to the Holy Land, and she wanted me to come. "Where's that?" I asked, secretly hoping she would say Kenya. She did not. But I went on the trip when I learned that I would get to float in the Dead Sea. It sounded fun. And that's what I was expecting, to get away and have some fun. What I wasn't expecting was that while in Jerusalem, I would have an intense mystical experience. I would lose all track of time and become completely absorbed in the present moment where everything was lit. The ordinary shimmered. It was a world of wonder and a symphony of sound. At one point, I was in a park photographing two children who were playing, and a man approached who I assumed was their father. Through sign language, he was asking me if he gave me his address, would I send him some of the pictures? I looked at my Nikon camera with the telephoto lens, and I realized I could just give him the camera. Just handing it over felt like the simplest, easiest thing in the world. He was pretty shocked, and he did not want to accept it, but I was very convincing. The beauty of that moment was priceless compared to the price of that camera, compared to all the attachment and holding on that so often dictated my actions. In Jerusalem, the more I let go, the more beauty multiplied. The experience lasted an amazing and disorienting 5 days. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. And at a certain point, I became aware that other people on the trip didn't feel the way I did. And I got all up in my head, and I started overthinking and hyper-analyzing to the point of paranoia. The mystical, for me, was touched with madness. It wasn't either or. It was both and. Connected and crazy. Ultimately, it overwhelmed me, and I was hospitalized in Jerusalem, told I'd had a psychotic break, and diagnosed bipolar. I remember thinking, oh my God, if I'm bipolar, then I have completely misunderstood this illness. I thought people with manic depression were out of control and that they either screamed or cried all the time. But I wasn't like that at all. I spent the next 2.5 years in and out of psychiatric facilities. I had a lot of time to think, and so I thought a lot about this idea of crazy. I could find it in myself, and I could find it in the world. A world where I could buy skinny water and size 00 jeans. My shortest stay in a mental hospital was 2 weeks. My longest was 6 months. But during that 2.5-year period, I also completed a master's in English and began dating the man I would eventually marry. How could those things happen simultaneously? How could I be falling apart and coming together? I couldn't articulate it yet, but my Jerusalem experience was opening a more conscious awareness in me that my life was not either or, that my falling apart implied my coming together, that within the madness was the harmony, and vice versa. Western medicine didn't exactly see it that way. Western medicine was not going to validate my mystical experience. And in a way, I'm grateful. because it meant that I needed to unpack the truth of my experience for myself. So I began reading the writings of different Christian, Jewish, and Sufi mystics. Much of what they wrote resonated. And then one day I came across a line in a book by the Buddhist nun Pema Chodron explaining, psychotics drown in the very same thing that the mystics swim in. I shivered with joy. That was Jerusalem. The mystic in me swam because she was pure presence, unfiltered and unafraid. The psychotic in me was drowning because she didn't trust the moment. She didn't trust the experience. She thought she needed to interpret each moment precisely and exactly in order to crack its cosmic code. The mystic sprang from my heart. The psychotic burrowed in my brain. I don't deny the bipolar diagnosis. I recognize that I pushed the experience by not trusting in it. I thought I needed to know what was happening. I didn't trust that just loving it was enough. I thought I had to do something. You know how when you're walking down the street and you're listening to a really great tune on your headphones, everything around you just makes sense? You see the rhythm and the beauty, and you realize that everything is perfect, just the way it is. That was my initial experience in Jerusalem. But I didn't trust that it would last, and I panicked at the thought of losing it. So I tried really hard to hold on. I tried to love it in a way nothing had ever been loved before, to earn it, to be worthy of the gift of it, to prove that I understood. But effort creates distance, not intimacy. And instead of dancing, I tweaked. I sped up the natural rhythm to a fevered pitch, and now that beautiful song was a garbled, manic noise. I got up in my head, trying to control and acting out of fear. And acting out of fear really is crazy making. Possessive, doubting. That's when the music stopped. Or more accurately, that's when I could no longer hear it. What we call losing one's mind is, in my experience, the opposite. My insanity came from being stuck in my head, believing the fearful thoughts that arose there. Years later, I would learn that the thoughts themselves were harmless, and that it was the power of my belief in them that made them appear real. Still, in the process of losing my mind, I recovered the richness of my soul. And now my essence, my being, have texture. When someone has cancer, we don't say that they are cancer. But when someone is struggling with mental illness, we say that they are that. He is depressed. She is bipolar. They are schizophrenic. That may be an accurate description of the mind, but never the spirit. My spirit was not bipolar. That's not possible. That luminous being within me, that abiding presence within each of us, is never sick or scared or able to be hurt in any way. It may sound crazy to say, but I found an eternal being within me who was never born and can never die. A presence that is both personal and universal, as vast as the sky and closer than my next breath. It's taken me years to unpack what happened in Jerusalem. Different people see it differently. Some say I had a psychotic break. Others say it was a spiritual awakening. Could it be both? What matters most is what I make of the experience. Because whatever story I tell is the one I'm going to live. So what have I discovered in that fierce embrace of mental illness and mysticism? I found myself. I found my fear, and I found my love, and how they connect within me. It's been 20 years, and I've been lovingly married for 16 of them. I haven't been on medication for over 10 years. I am a theater artist and a teacher, a mother, and a friend. And the young woman who didn't know anything about the Holy Land is now a minister, celebrating love in all its remarkable forms. The bottom line is this: the wound is the medicine. What I thought was the end was a beginning. Devastation was my path to freedom. What felt like an excruciating curse turned out to be my deepest blessing. The wound is the medicine. Whatever hell you may be going through, whatever fear or grief, look again. Listen even more deeply. The pain you feel is real, but it's not because you're dying. You're living. Those are labor pains. You are being born into a life beyond what you'd imagined for yourself, and no one can birth it for you. It's uncharted territory, and now I call it home.